Hey everyone, this is going to be another tutorial on making a simple JavaScript project. This time we're going to be creating a hexadecimal color clock. So what this project does is it takes the current time and it creates a hexadecimal color from it. So once it gets this color, it updates the body's background color to be that color. So every second the background color is going to be changing to become this hex color. So the way this works is we get the current time, we turn it into this format, and then using a set interval, we're going to keep updating the body's background color to be that color we got from the current time. So let's get right into it. Let me exit out of this. So I have my basic project structure already set up. I have an index.html file, and I have a folder for my CSS and JavaScript files. So for this project, I just have one file in each one. So I have a style.css and I have an app.js. So let's start with our HTML. As you saw in that example, we only had two elements. We had the clock, which was actual time, and then we had the hexadecimal color of that time. So let me just give a random title, just call it hex color clock. And we had two elements, so I'll create an h1 for the timer, or let's just call it the clock. And we have a paragraph element for the, what was it, the hex color. And that's actually all we need for HTML. So now all we have to do is link to our CSS file and our JavaScript file. So let's start with our CSS. We'll create a link tag, and we'll give the path to our CSS file, which is css/style.css. So let me just open this up in the browser, and let's just play around to make sure everything's loaded properly. So I'll open up my style.css. Let's give the body a background color, let's just say red. Okay, so it works. So we know our CSS file is properly loaded in. So let's just start working on that. Okay, so let's start with the clock. So why don't I put in some fake values right now so we can play around with the styles. And then that would look like this. Okay, cool. So why don't we give it a better font? We'll use Lato. And we don't want it to be so bold, so we'll give it a font weight of 300, and we'll also make the font a lot bigger. So we want to select this H1. I give an ID of clock, so we can just select that. We'll make the font weight 300, and we'll make the font size a lot bigger. Let's just use something like 100 pixels. Okay, that looks a bit nicer. So why don't we center it horizontally and also push it down a bit? So to push it down a bit, we can just add some margin on the body. We'll just do margin top 200. Okay, and now we just have to center the body as well. So we can just do text align center, and that should align it horizontally. And looks like we got that. So now all we need to do is actually get the time from the current time and turn it to a hexadecimal color, and then update the body to be that color. So that's going to be, all of that's going to be done in our JavaScript file. So we can exit out of this CSS now and open up the JavaScript. So the way we're going to get the current time is using the date object. The date object is what lets you have access to the current date and time and all the stuff you want with that. So we're going to be creating a new date object, and the way we're going to do that is instead of using date.now, we're going to use new date. And the reason we want to do that is because it'll let us have access to all these methods like get hours, get minutes, get seconds, which we'll be able to use. So let's create a new date object. Var time equals new date. So why don't we just make sure that we have access to those? So why don't we do console.log time.get hours, and we'll do it for each one. We'll do it for minutes and seconds. This is actually not going to work, and I'll show you why. So let's check our console, and we don't see anything. And so just remember, before you actually start working on your JavaScript, make sure you load it properly in your HTML. So let's create a script tag, give it a source of js/app.js. So you can see that it got the hours, minutes, and seconds during that time. And you can see that for the hours, it gave 18 instead of 6. So why is that? And the reason is because get hours actually gives you the time in a 24-hour clock format. So 6 would actually be 18 when it's PM. And there's a way around that. So what we can do is use the mod operator, this %sign. And so we can get the remainder when we divide by 12. So this way, it'll divide it by 12, and whatever remainder you get, it'll use that. So 18 divided by 12 will give you a remainder of 6, so it will use that. So now if we do it, you'll see that we get 6 instead of 18. So now we know how to get the current date and all the minutes and seconds. So how do we update this clock to use that? So we can actually access the text content of this clock. So why don't we get some references to these two elements? We can say var clock equals document.getElement by ID. And same thing for our hex color. So let me just put this in here. We don't really need to look at the HTML right now. And so I'm going to get rid of this. So let's just say we wanted to change the text content of this clock right here. So all we would have to do is clock that text content, and you can put in whatever value you want for it. So we just say hello. You'll see that it'll change to hello. So that's how easy it is to just change the text content of any HTML element in our DOM. So let's put it all into a function. So we'll say function, let's just call it hex clock. And the reason we want to put all this into a function is so that we can use set interval to repeat this function over and over and over again. So what this hex clock function is going to do is it's going to get the current time, it's going to turn into a hex color format, and then it'll update the text content of the clock and the hex color. And then once it does that, it'll change the background color of the body. So let's start that. So first thing first is we need to get the current time. As I showed you previously, we can just do var time equals new date. And let's store the minutes, seconds, and milliseconds in, hours, minutes, and seconds into variables. So we can do var minutes equals time.get minutes. Same thing for the seconds and hours. So we'll start with hours actually. Cool. So now that we got all the variables we need, let's try to change it to a hexadecimal color format. So remember that a hex color format looks something like this. It starts with this pound sign or hashtag, and then it has 6 characters after it. So basically we need to turn the hours, minutes, and seconds into 6 characters like this. So the only issue is that hours can return either 1 or 2 numbers, and same thing with minutes and seconds. So if the minutes was 18, it would be fine because it gives you 2 digits, so each one of these would give you 2. But let's say the current minutes was something like 5, or like in this case, the hours would be 6. So because the hours is 6, it would only be 5 characters in total. So what we need to do is make sure that there is a 0 in front of the current value if it's not 2 digits. So we can do that over here. So for each one of these, we can say if hours.length is less than 2, we'll say hours equals 0 plus hours. So we're putting a 0 in front of it. Also, we have to keep in mind that these get hours, get minutes, get seconds actually return a number, so we can't actually check the length of them. So we have to turn it into a string using toString. And same thing here, and same thing here. So we have to do this for each one of these. So if minutes.length is less than 2, We'll say minutes equals 0 plus minutes, and same thing for seconds. Okay, cool. So now that we got our hours, minutes, and seconds to be 2 characters each, we can now put them together into a string. So we'll say hex color string equals, so we'll start with the hashtag, and then we'll add the hours and the minutes and the seconds. So this will give our color in this kind of format. So now that we got our format, let's update our clock and hex color to use the time and the hex color string. So why don't we also get the format for the clock itself? So before we get this format for the hex color, we'll say clock string equals, so let's do the hours, and we'll add a colon, and the minutes, and we'll add a dot, and the seconds. So we'll get the format of this clock that should look like this. So the clock string will be the format for this, and our hex color string will be the format for this one. So now all we have to do is change the text content of our two elements. So we'll say clock.textContent equals clock string, and what's it called? Hex color dot text content equals hex color string. Okay, cool. So now let's just run this function one time and see if it works. Run our function. So you can see that it did, oh, we have to make sure that we use mod 12 to make sure that it doesn't use a 24-hour format. So we'll just do var hours equals mod 12, and it'll use toString on that. Okay, that should work. So let's see. Okay, cool. So as you can see, if I refresh, it is working. We are getting the current time and updating these two text content. Obviously, we want to do it constantly using setInterval, but the function itself does work. So now the only thing this function still has to do is update the background color of the body to be this color that we created. So how can we do that? Well, the body is actually an element that can be accessed by doing document.body. And we want to update the style of this body. So we can say .style, and then we have to specify what style attribute we want to change. So in this case, we want to change the background color. And so what background color do we want to change it to? So let's just try it out. If we just did red, you can see that I changed it to red. So instead of changing it to red, we want to change it to this hex color we created. So we can just say hex color string. And as you can see, it changed it to be the color of the current hex color. So if I keep refreshing, you can see that the color is changing, pretty slightly, but it is changing. And as the number gets higher, it'll like be more obvious. And so I just want to make a small CSS adjustment just so it shows up better. Let's change the color to white, as the colors are usually going to be pretty dark since the numbers are low. Okay, that looks a bit better. So now, instead of running this function once, what we want to do is use setInterval to run this function over and over again. So we can do setInterval, and we can pass in the function we want to run. We call this function hexClock, and we want to run it every second. So every time the second changes, we want to run this function. So now let's try it out. Okay, so you notice that in the beginning there was that white flare where there was nothing, and then the code started running the next second after. So the problem is the setInterval is actually going to wait a second before running the function. So what we have to do is before we start our setInterval, we have to run our function just once. And once we do that, then it won't like skip that first second. So now, as you can see, if I refresh, we have our working clock. And that's actually all there was to it. So you have this working stopwatch hex color clock that gets the current time, turns it into a hexadecimal color, and then updates the background of the body color. What? Updates the background color of the body. So it's pretty simple, nothing too fancy, but I just thought it was cool and thought it'd be cool to share. So feel free to ask any questions in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.